The chilled air inside the Tucson funeral chapel suppressed the punishing heat outside. Amanda shivered as she took a seat on the cool metal chair. She leaned over and whispered to her husband in the chair next to her, "A sweater in Arizona in September?" He nodded casually, apparently unfazed by the abrupt temperature change from scorching to polar. Neil had worn a suit, though she told him she didn't think he had to, and she envied his long sleeves. He quietly cleared his throat, opened the program he'd been handed when they walked in, and began to read the obituary of the woman whose casket sat several feet away, the woman neither of them had ever met. A generous waft of newly refrigerated air spilled from the vent above her head, and Amanda instinctively turned to her niece on the other side. The teenager's arms were bare under a flamingo-hued halter dress. Amanda wondered if the foster mother had given Tally any advice at all on what she might want to wear to her grandmother's funeral. Amanda again turned to her husband. "I think we should have come yesterday." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Neil looked up from the program. "It wouldn't have changed anything," he replied gently. "Besides, we got here as quick as we could. It's not your fault. You didn't know she was here. Your brother should have told you." Neil reached for her hand and gave it a squeeze. Amanda looked down and noticed a thin line of wood stain under one of his fingernails, evidence that he had cleaned up from his latest woodworking project in a hurry. Neil turned back to the program, and Amanda looked over at her niece. "You doing okay?" She hesitated, then placed an arm around Tally's shoulders. The girl flinched and glanced at Amanda's arm before turning back to face the casket. The 16-year-old shrugged. "I didn't really know my grandma." The words were laced with casual regret, as if she knew people were supposed to know their grandparents, but what could she do about that now? Amanda intuitively pulled Tally closer. The girl stiffened at first and then relaxed, reminding Amanda that Tally barely knew her either. Amanda hadn't seen her niece in nearly a decade. A handful of phone calls over the last few years, including one from a Texas jail and one from a chateau in Switzerland, had confirmed that Bart was still alive and that he still had Tally. Bart tended to contact her only in desperate times, and most of the time he didn't recognize his own desperation. She had always felt like the older sister when it came to Bart, the one who watched out for him, the one who tried to keep him out of trouble, the one their parents expected more from. It had always amazed her that Bart was just fine with that arrangement. She had been in junior high when he left home at 17, and he'd come home only twice in the years before she graduated from high school. Bart missed their parents' quiet divorce, missed their mother's remarriage to an Australian man who had no intention of living anywhere but Melbourne, missed her wedding to Neil and the births of her 2 children, missed their father's last agonizing days of pancreatic cancer. In 30 years, Bart had missed just about everything, including all opportunities for his family to get to know Tally. The opening notes of the organist's ballpark rendition of "Shall We Gather at the River" startled her, and she barely heard the buzz of her husband's vibrating cell phone. Neil pulled the phone out of his suit pocket. "It's a text from Delcy," he said. "She wants to know if she can sleep over at Mallory's house tonight. They want to go to the beach." Amanda crinkled an eyebrow at the thought of her daughter not being home when they flew back to San Diego. "Tonight?" Neil looked at her. "Maybe it's a good idea." "No, not tonight, Neil. She can go to the beach, but she should be home tonight, don't you think?" "I guess." "Which beach? How is she getting there?" "Encinitas. Chase said he'd take her," Neil said, looking at the tiny screen on his phone. Amanda wondered for a moment how Chase would feel about making the 32-mile round trip to the beach. With Delcy out of the house, Chase would have the place to himself until she and Neil returned that evening. Their quiet 17-year-old probably couldn't wait to get his chatty younger sister out of the house. It hadn't passed her notice that her children were the same ages she and Bart had been when Bart left home. Chase's introspective nature and stark Teutonic features were similar to Bart's, but beyond that he was nothing like her brother. and Delcy thankfully did not have to mother Chase like she'd mothered Bart.